What's up, guys? Today I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on at 704 Games and what's in store for the future, or at least the near future, in terms of NASCAR video game development. Uh, right off the front, I'm just going to tell you I, I couldn't find any information. I did the basic Google searches, I read some of the Reddit, you know, sub forums and stuff like that, but really, other than speculation and just opinions from people, there's no real solid information other than what we already know, which is the esports side of 704 shut down. They laid people off, and that's really all we know right now. As well as that Sean Wilson and the development team is going to continue working on the game, and that nothing has really changed there. So that's all we really know. And unless there's new information, that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna do a little bit of speculating, as well as ask further questions that maybe somebody out there knows. What happened to Ed Martin? I'm really curious to know what happened to him because he is the original founding member of 704, which was Duesenberg. Him and I forgot the guy's first name. I'm sorry, but it was known as Duesenberry Martin Racing the first year, and then they rebranded to 704 Games. But Ed Martin is with him. Him and Duesenberry are the founding members of the company. I never really knew much about who Duesenberry is, other than an investor and a founding member. But Ed Martin was head of development way back when EA was making the Thunder series. He was in charge of development of that series, and most people would agree that the 2003, 2004, and 2005 Thunder series is probably the best NASCAR games that have been made, and most people look back and 2004 is the one. So he was in charge of development at the time at EA, and eventually he also was part of the Utechnics team when they were making NASCAR games, which was disastrous in my opinion. But that was about 5 years of nothing. So then him and Duesenberry founded Duesenberry Martin Racing, and then eventually they rebranded to 704. And then Motorsports came in last year, and as an investor, and this is where things get really confusing. I can't be 100% sure who's really running the show now and who's in what place. So we heard Sean Wilson and the development team is still working on the game, which leads me to believe that Sean Wilson is in charge of development of the actual game. I could be wrong, but that's what it sounds like. So I'm wondering what happened to Ed Martin. I know that he was heading the esports thing on the esports side, or he was involved at a high level. So they're gone. They laid off a bunch of people. Was Ed Martin let go? I haven't, that's one thing I'm curious about. Maybe when Sean Wilson is on Twitter, supposedly December 3rd at 3 p.m., he's going to have a Q&A thing. So that's one of the things I'm interested to know, like what's going on behind the scenes. But I'm going to say right off the bat, I wouldn't expect to hear anything other than the generic response that we've already heard of Sean Wilson and the team is still working on the game moving forward, and that nothing there has changed. So I don't know where Ed Martin fits in the picture. Is he gone? I don't know. And I never understood this whole esports venture. It was, you guys know I was not on board with that. For me, it was, that announcement was just a big negative for me. This whole thing with motorsports.com coming in, and I don't know who is really at the top of the business and really pulling all the levers? I don't know. Haven't heard about Ed Martin. And why am I so concerned about him in particular? Well, like I said, he's a founding member of 704. He has been involved in NASCAR game development for many, many years. So I'm just curious. What happened to him? Is he still involved at 704? Maybe did he take another position now? Or was he just ousted? I mean, I don't know. Who actually owns the company? It started as Dusenberry Martin. It rebranded as 704. And then when motorsports came in, that's when I think things got really confusing. So I'm not going to lie to you guys. I don't really know for sure what's what. So I'm curious. But like I said, we're not going to get answers to that. We're not going to get them from Sean Wilson. That's for sure. And quite honestly, I don't really think he owes answers on that side of the business to us as consumers. When you look at any business, any corporation or company, the last people to really know what's going on is the public and the people who just got shit canned and given their pink slips. Unfortunately, these people that got laid off, I guarantee you, most of them were probably blindsided because that's how business works. The people at the very top, the CEOs, the people that make all the main decisions, they don't tell their employees how bad things are. The ship could be sinking very slowly, and everybody's just going to work, business as usual, and the only person that knows what's happening is the captain. And maybe his, chief officer, and then they're like, okay, how do we deal with this? And they don't really, the word doesn't get down to the people that are most affected until it's too late. So what I'm trying to say to you guys is we're not going to get answers about, what's going on or how much trouble this company is in. So all I can do really is speculate and just give you my opinion, which is they're making the game, they're moving forward, but I don't think anybody could be secure or confident about this team developing games into the future beyond the next game. I think that's a big question mark. And one, if they knew they were in trouble, they're not going to. Sean Wilson's not going to come out and say, "Yeah, we're going through a lot of problems right now, and the future is very uncertain and murky." He's not going to say that. That's how business works. They're going to give you the best positive spin on everything. Tell you, "Hey, we had to shuttle this side of the business. We had to lay people off, but we're still moving forward. The game's still being made. Have no fear. We still plan on moving forward, and we're working on the next game." And and that's what you're gonna hear. I promise you. So we don't know what happened with Ed Martin, which may or may not affect game development at all, because he was part of esports now. But I always found that weird. Right? The founding member of 704, who's been involved in NASCAR game development for many, many years, going back to the EA Thunder Series, in charge over, or at least high up in the food chain at Eutechnics, which was a horrible series. But what I'm saying is he's been a part of just NASCAR video game development. So it's just to not hear anything about what happened with him or what future plans are. It's just a big question mark for me, and it may not mean anything. It's just something I'm curious about, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get answers to that unless Ed Martin comes out on Twitter or just tells people what's going on. So maybe he has that, and I don't know. If any of you guys know anything, let me know. So that's basically it. They're going to tell us games moving forward. We're working on it. That's that. So now we move on to the actual game development and the future. So I do expect there to be what I'm assuming is going to be NASCAR Heat 5. So the next question is, what are these guys working on this year? And that is the biggest question of all for me. It's the most immediate concern I have because I don't think anybody can afford to think about, you know, the next year or the year after that. There's no point in looking that far into the future because it's so uncertain. And this is a small company. A lot of people are focused on the fact that they have a 10-year license, and I don't think people really understand how the licensing works. Now, I'm not an expert, but licensing is just permission granted by NASCAR to a developer to say, hey, you want to make NASCAR games and use, you know, our likeness and our property, we grant that permission. And then whatever agreement, financial or business wise, comes along with that, that's another thing altogether. But the fact is, the licensing deal for 10 years is just selling 704 or Motorsports or Sean Wilson and the team, whatever they are now as an entity. It's just basically saying to them, you have the license for 10 years, you can continue to make these games, but a lot of that is contingent on the developer, whether they can afford to keep making games. How is the business going in terms of game sales and profitability? We don't know how they're doing, or at least I don't. So are they able to sustain growth and profitability where they can keep doing this as a business for the next 10 years? You know, game developers, as any business, they come and they go. Plans are made, you got your licensing deal. That doesn't mean that it's a guarantee they're going to be making games for 10 years. It's not. And if I was a betting man, and I really don't want to be negative, because they're a small company and now they're going through a rough patch financially, at least in terms of as the company. I know they're making it seem like, okay, it's just the esports side of things, but the fact is, that was a part of the company. So to have to shut down an entire section of your company and lay people off, I don't care how anybody puts it, that must have an effect on the development, the game development. Excuse me. So you're not going to tell me that it has no effect or that it's not going to affect the company or at least the development of the game. So looking at that, looking at how small they are as a company, if I was a betting man, I don't think they'll be around in a couple of years. I think this next game is going to be made. I'll put it out, and a lot can happen from here to the time the game's released. And hopefully they continue to grow and improve, which they have done. But we don't know how they are doing business-wise. And this company could be totally defunct in 2 or 3 years. So to think that this 10-year license is somehow a guarantee that these games are going to keep coming out for 10 years by this company doesn't mean nothing. It's a license, that's all it is. And a license could be just handed to someone else or also give a license. They can give a license to another developer if they feel like it, or unless there's an agreement between 704 that says they are the only maker of the game. But if they go out of business, all bets are off. The license is going to be meaningless. There's also a lot of people that from time to time you see them talk about, oh, give the license to EA, they need to come back. Or give it to Codemasters, or give it to so-and-so. As if it's that easy to just say, hey, here's a license, go make these games. First of all, a developer has to show interest. Okay? When EA had the license, and the last game was 2009, we didn't get a game after that until Eutechnics. Well, why wasn't anyone banging on NASCAR's door asking for a license to make a NASCAR game. It just the interest wasn't there. People probably felt like the game sales may not be worth it, or they didn't see that potential. Um, Also, EA is a horrible company. Whatever they used to do, this is night and day a different company. It's still called EA. It's a different company, man. It's all about microtransactions, and almost everything they do is gains a negative following because of the way they do business and the games they push out. So be careful what you wish for. For EA to come back and start making NASCAR games, people think they're going to start getting games like we used to get 15 years ago. You know, NASCAR 2004 Thunder is a 15, 16-year-old game. This company is, everyone that was involved with that game is no longer part of EA. So just because EA decides we're going to make NASCAR games, that might be the worst thing that could happen. So that's one thing. If I had to pick someone that I wish would show interest and maybe get the license eventually, would be Codemasters, because they still make great games. And if you see what they're doing with the Formula One series, that's what I want this series to go into that direction, because it's a fully fleshed out product. There's presentation, there's a narrative, and all the things that are missing from NASCAR games and have been missing for many years, even talking about Eutechnics, they are doing it. They understand what the game needs to be. But that being said, the fact is, it's 704's baby, so there's no point in wishing someone else just come along and save the day. Also, I happen to think 704 has made big strides, and they've made improvements, and they've listened to the community, which is a very rare thing. I don't know if I've ever seen another developer who worked with the community as much as they do. I'm not saying they're perfect. And as I've said before, their communication and their marketing, there's a lot of things I hate about the way they do things, but they do seem to listen. They do pay attention to the community, and certain things that they hear repeated by the community, things that they've wanted, they've gone and they've made that attempt to make sure that they deliver. So I have to give them credit on that, and I don't see a lot of companies doing that, and that's a good reputation to have as a company. So be careful. I think they're doing a commendable job under the circumstances. Again, they are a small company, and now you see that there's a rough patch they're going through. So I don't know what to say, but people really do need to stop that other stuff. It's really out of everyone's hands, really, because the licensing agreement's there, but at the same time, if 704 just collapses or can't get it done, the licensing agreement means nothing. Who knows? Maybe somebody does show the desire to come in and make a NASCAR game, but there's nothing that leads me to believe that the developers out there who's clamoring to come in and tackle NASCAR. I don't know if it's there. So the future's very uncertain. But right now, the only information I think we can possibly get from Sean Wilson or from 704 is what they're working on and what their plan is for this game. So when it comes to that, all I really want to hear is, in terms of career mode, that they're doubling down on career mode, that they are finally going to go in and really tackle presentation and installing a narrative. The real problem with this game, this last game, is that it's very one note, meaning it does one thing really well, and I have to commend them. The gameplay mechanics, the actual racing on the track is great. Is not perfect, okay? They're they have to keep tweaking it and improving it, but they've managed to get it to where, in my opinion, it is. It's the best console NASCAR game ever made for racing. Racing the AI on the track, it does that really well. And even with room for improvement, they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I think that in terms of the space that it operates in terms of being a console game, it hits that balance between being arcade and being somewhat of a simcade. There are people out there who keep wanting these guys to be a simulator. That's not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen. It's a console-based video game, and I think one of the lessons that should be learned from what's going on with esports is to stay in your lane and stop trying to branch out and do. They tried to do too much. They took a gamble, right? I think they looked at the popularity of video games as a competitive thing, whether it's esports or one of these other ventures where you see these competitions among gamers and stuff like that. And I think they looked at that and they said, this is going to be the next big thing and we better get in. And it didn't work out. And the biggest reason that it didn't work out was there already exists something for people who want to race online against other players in a competitive way. There's already a market that's filled, and that's iRacing. And that's the problem here. This is a video game. iRacing is a service. iRacing is not a video game. Yes, it has that element of it's kind of a video game, but it's not. It's a simulator, and it's a service. You're paying monthly fees. And they pay people simply to run this service. It's not just like they put up a bunch of servers and let people play on them. They actively operate and maintain this service. So you pay monthly fees. You got to buy a bunch of extra stuff. It's for hardcore online racing. So if that's what you're interested in, you are going to go to iRacing. You're not going to go and buy a NASCAR Heat video game for a console looking for that competition against online racers in an organized community. You can't get that with a video game. And that's what people fail to realize. Stop asking these guys to make a simulator. It's not going to be a simulator, and it shouldn't be. Here's what it should be. Be a fucking video game. Video game that provides fun, immersion, the gameplay mechanics, which they have managed to really do a great job on. The game is fun. You jump in, you pick a race, you set up everything the way you want it, and the game is going to give you a fun experience on the track. It's not perfect. There are little issues here and there, but in my opinion, there's no game-breaking issues. And if you look back to years ago, there was always game-breaking issues with these video games. And these guys have managed to get it to a point where the shit actually works the way that it should, and it provides entertainment. The problem that they still have and have not addressed is that when you leave the racetrack, there's nothing going on. There's nothing to tie in that career mode. So you're basically just jumping from one race to the next. Nothing happens in between. And that's the biggest thing holding these guys back. That's what they have to address. Which a million times, I know you've heard me talk about this stuff, but the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And if you don't keep hammering away at this stuff, it's not going to get addressed. And I'm helping 704 by telling them, dude, you have to work on presentation and creating a narrative. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look at every other sports game. They all have presentation and a narrative. Look, as horrible as 2K has become, the NBA 2K series became known and famous and popular because of the career mode, right? Not because of the actual gameplay on the basketball court, which, yeah, it was good, and it that has to work. Obviously, that's the centerpiece, but they managed to create a career mode where there's so much happening in between games and off the court that kept your interest and made you feel, now I'm not just jumping into a basketball game. Now I'm actually living as an NBA player, getting drafted, dealing with contracts, sponsorships, commercial endorsements, contracts, teammates, working out, incentives, meeting incentives, and seeing the results of what happens when you achieve certain achievements throughout your career, and it's all surrounded by amazing presentation. So the game is more than just basketball. It's more than just showing up, playing the basketball game, and then go to the next game. And that's what made the NBA 2K series so great. That as horrible as they've become, it's not because of that narrative. It's because of microtransactions and all this other bullshit. The same problem that almost every developer's partaking in, right? When you look at MLB The Show, same thing. There's presentation, there's a narrative. You have to feel like, I'm not just showing up, jumping in a race car, racing on Sunday, and then off to the next race. What the fuck happens in between? You got sponsors. You got, so much that you can do. Also, as an owner, it's basically a bare bones mobile. It feels like a mobile game. That's how far behind they are, and that's killing this series on that end. So really, this is being held up strictly by the racing and the gameplay mechanics. So now they have to work on that other stuff. If I don't hear that these guys are actively working on that, the future does not look bright for these guys. And I'm going to keep hammering away at this, but they have to get that message. You got to provide the rest of that narrative and real presentation. And look at the Formula One series. Look at even NASCAR Thunder 2004, which I'm sure they hate hearing about because they're like constantly beaten over the head with it. But there's a reason for that. When you look at the pre-race presentation and all the other little details of that game, that's what made that game so memorable, that people love. So they got to get on the ball. Now, one last thing before I close out. Speaking of presentation and a narrative and all fleshing out the rest of this game and all that entails, as much as we have to praise them for improving the gameplay mechanics and the actual on-track racing and the AI and all that stuff, and even the physics, off-track, they've never shown anything as far as having even the ability to do what they need to do. So there is a part of me that's worried that maybe they don't know how to do it or have the ability. I hope I'm wrong. They've proven that they can create a solid racing experience on track. They've proven that. And they still have room to improve, and I expect them to keep tweaking on that. But I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe that they have the capability of creating that narrative and working on presentation, tying everything together to make it feel like a fully fleshed out real career mode that keeps people around and also entices casual fans, right? Because the people that are buying these games, they're mostly NASCAR fans, people that are really hardcore about it. I don't think a lot of casual people, and I'm just guessing, look at these games and they're like, okay, yeah, but what else is going on? And those people play games like NBA 2K and MLB The Show and these other sports games, and they look at that and they're like, over here I got crazy customization. And there's face scanning. You can actually scan your face into the game and actually see yourself in the game. There's all kinds of customization. There's presentation, amazing presentation. And you look at these games and then you're like, why should I buy this game if I'm not a hardcore NASCAR fan? And that's a problem. And that's how you increase game sales. You got to entice people that there's actually things going on off the track. And incentivize people to do things and play the career mode out. Because right now, after you play maybe 4 or 5 seasons of career mode and you've made X amount of money, you've really maxed out everything in your shop and your personnel, there's no reason to keep playing the career mode because it's just jumping from one race to the next. You don't feel like you're continuing to build a real career. So now I'm at a point where I just jump in and single and do quick races. So when I got that itch to race, the game does fill that itch. I scratch that itch. I jump on. I'll run 100% race at Kansas. I got all my settings just right, and the game provides all the competition and excitement I could ask for on the track. The sound is phenomenal. I can't stop praising the sound of this fucking game. And I love it, and it immerses me on the track, and I get my fill. But once I finish that race, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go play Red Dead Redemption 2 or Grand Theft Auto or whatever. And that's the problem. I don't spend long periods of time on the game because there's nothing else. It's just go in, run your race. It's great for what it does, and then the race is over. And you feel like, okay, I got it out my system. Now what am I going to play? So I go and I play Red Dead Redemption 2 or some other game. And that's the problem when you don't address the rest of the game. You got to have something there for people to keep coming back and being like, oh, what's going to happen after this race? And what's going on at the shop? And what do I have to deal with now? And as an owner, let us hire drivers. So when you're on the track, now not only are you racing all of these other drivers, but one of those drivers is actually a car you own and a guy that drives for you. And you're racing them as well. And not only are you invested in how you do in a race, you're invested in how your other driver does. And that adds a whole new layer to the whole career mode. And this is what I've been trying to convey to 704 for years. And hopefully they do get that message. But if they just come out and they keep tweaking, the gameplay mechanics, and then they're off to something else or add another series or something, that's not good, man. And it's never going to elevate this game to the point where casual fans want to check it out as well. So those are my thoughts. And I don't know, man. I'm not super confident in the future. Beyond this next game, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they get their act together and they actually, if they address the things I'm talking about and continue to evolve and listen and improve and add that desperately needed presentation and narrative and all that stuff to the career mode, I think they can get themselves to a point where they're on solid ground and they can look towards the future and maybe stick around for that 10-year license. Otherwise, if they don't address these things this year, and I put out that wish list for NASCAR E5, and I suggest that Sean Wilson and anyone else who's at the top there now at 704, check that video out and take those suggestions, man. I'm telling you, that's what's going to elevate this game to something that excites people. So I commend them for their improvements and listening to the community, but that's the direction you have to go. Anything else is really not good. Now, as far as online racing, I don't want to forget you guys who care about online. I think there is a lot you can do to improve online, and I've talked about those things. But the main thing that 704 needs to do is just give people a template where they can run their own league and customize it any way they want, make their own schedule, let as many people as they want sign in, and have dates and all kinds of stuff. And I think that will incentivize people to really come on online racing, run long races, be part of a league where you feel like there's a sense of accomplishment. Right now, it's just sitting around lobbies, jumping into these quick little sprint races, and then sitting in a lobby again. If you add up all the time you waste sitting in lobbies and how much time you spend actually racing, I don't know how people do it. And that's why you don't see me online. I jump on periodically just to get a taste, and then I get right off. It will never deliver for me the type of entertainment that the offline racing against AI does. It's just nowhere near that. And a big part of that is, I think that it's just a big free-for-all right now. People sitting in lobbies and just jumping into these quick little sprints. I don't get it. But that's a big way you could improve the online. But, man, you got to go all in on career mode. And for God's sake, get rid of those live action video messages from drivers. That is not presentation. That's not a substitute for presentation. Get rid of it. It's cringeworthy, and I just hate it. You got to get into it the way every other sports game does it. That's it. That's really all I have to say for now until we actually find out what's going on. December 3rd with the Q&A. I'm going to try to ask Sean, but I don't really think I need to go on Twitter for that. I think that somebody's going to ask, what are you working on with NASCAR Heat 5? And hopefully he does at least give us enough detail that says, hey, we're working on career mode. We're working on implementing this, and this. And it's going to be more fleshed out. It's going to have a narrative. And you're going to feel like there's actually things happening off track. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to fucking hear about adding another series. I don't want to hear about anything else. Just the same, or I'm going to have the same reaction I had when this esports thing was announced. And was I right or was I wrong? I was never on board with this esports shit. Like I said, there is a market for that. It's already filled. It's called iRacing. Stick to what you're supposed to be, a video game. And make the best video game you can possibly make. That's how you succeed, and that's how you elevate this series of games. Everything else, forget about it. So, that's all I want to say for now. I look forward to your comments, and let's see what happens December 3rd. Later.